Story 1. I helped a Wendigo, and I regret it all. When this happened, I was living in a small town with lots of forest nearby. It was small, and everybody was friendly with each other, living in an area where everyone knows everyone. My ma and pa didn't really take stranger danger seriously. Don't hop in a stranger's van, don't take candy from people you don't know well is the most I was told. Being young at the time I was taught this, I wasn't told why. I wasn't told of how monstrous humans could truly be. In my innocent mind, I saw no reasons for a person to want to hurt others. I believe this for most other creatures too. I wasn't afraid of animals or insects. So, it was no surprise that this would have happened. Seeing how stupid I was. It was an early spring, and I was going for a usual walk through the neighborhood, and into the local woods. Admiring the flowers and listening to the birds' calls, I was drawn further into the darkness that was that fucking forest. Soon, I didn't even know where I was. The trees weren't familiar. I was deeper into the woods than I'd gone before. And just before I traced my steps back home, I heard something. Help! The voice was dry, raspy, and quiet. It sounded strained, like whoever was speaking felt pain to do so. I turned back, trying to find out who or what was calling for me, although my innocent mind was certain it was a person. Over here. I followed the voice, and soon found the creature in front of me. Its long limbs wrapped in the thorny brambles it was trapped in. Its face covered by its long, blood-soaked hair. Please, help me, child. Despite what I wanted to do, my gut told me not to go closer to it. It was dangerous. I ignored the feeling, as I tried to remove the brambles from the creature's body. I only succeeded in cutting my hands. I can't get you out, I sadly told the creature. Try harder, you don't want me to die here, do you? It shook its head, removing the few vines I'd managed to pull off its antlers. Of course I don't want you to die. I then remembered my mother's pruning shears. I'd seen her use them to cut plants before, so they should work, right? I'll be right back, I can get some tools to cut you free. As I got up to leave, it grabbed my leg. Don't go, I'll be lonely. We can free me later. The creature pulled me back down to the ground. I stared at it again, noticing all the bones poking through its skin. That's all it really was. Skin and bones. Breaking the eerie silence, it spoke again. My name is Enoki, what is yours? I didn't hesitate to respond. I'm T. After that, we started to talk more. Until the sun started going down, then I went home. That night I stayed awake in bed, wondering about my new friend. How did he get stuck there, anyway? The next day, I brought the pruning shears, and with some effort, I removed the brambles. Enoki never thanked me for the help, he just tried to stand up, but he was too wounded to move. I innocently asked, do you want me to go get my parents? They have band-aids. But he shook his head. I need more than that, I need food, to get stronger. And so, I ran home, and got some food. Mostly biscuits and some bread. I can't eat that, he turned away from the food in disgust. What do you eat then? He looked around, and then pointed at a small bird. It had gotten tangled in the nearby brambles. It was thrashing around, trying to get free. Go get that for me. I remember feeling scared in that moment. I loved birds. Whenever I found a wounded one, I'd try to take care of it before my pa would take it to the vet, while secretly just putting it down. But without even realizing what I was doing, I'd already removed the bird from the brambles. I watched in horror as Enoki ate the poor thing. He didn't seem to like it, but he did anyway. I kept visiting him every day, bringing him more birds or other poor animals for weeks. He was looking better each day, yet still bone-thin. Until eventually, I came to him with another bird. He wasn't sitting in the place he always sat. I called out for him, but he didn't come. Then I heard the trees above me shake. I looked up, just in time to run as it jumped down, and chased after me. It caught up to me in no time, it had longer legs, and was faster, and it grabbed my leg, and its claws sunk into me. I screamed, I screamed and screamed until half of the local neighborhood came running into the woods. 1 or 2 even had guns, but Enoki got away before he could be killed. I never set foot into the woods again. After I was patched up and told my story to the local newspaper, I was told about what Enoki really was. A Wendigo. I was told I was goddamned lucky to have gotten away, but stupid to have even helped him. My parents moved away after that, and I was properly taught about stranger danger. Story 2. I'm a cult leader and I've made a terrible mistake. I just wanted a bit of extra money. I've always been a really charismatic guy, not exactly unattractive, and I know how gullible some of those middle-aged spiritually active women can be. I know I'm an asshole, but I needed the money. I didn't want followers. I wasn't going to make anyone drink poison Kool-Aid. I didn't want 100 wives. I was going through a rough patch financially and just wanted a bit of money. To my credit, it worked. It worked well. One of my exes had been real into crystals and astrology and meditation and all that, so I had a pretty good knowledge base to run with. I set up a website, called it Eternal Enlightenment, and paid for an ad service to promote it on various spiritual websites. My business plan was pretty straightforward. I wore a white shirt, white pants, sat cross-legged on some cushions on my apartment balcony at golden hour, and talked into a camera for 30 to 45 minutes about chakras and energies and the power of the divine feminine and how one could achieve enlightenment just like I had. Clips of these videos were available for free on my website, with the full versions and exclusive videos available for $99 a month, only $800 if you paid for an entire year up front. Imagine how well that took off among my target demographic, enlightenment. Access to secrets of the universe for less than $100 a month. The money came rolling in pretty quickly. I had nearly 40 members after the first 6 months, and triple that at the end of the first year. Things were going really well for a while. I even had some members promoted, telling them and everyone else that they were truly enlightened and would send them out to conferences and things to host talks and Q&As. I even took on a phony Sanskrit name, Sri Daipa, Holy Light, that I said was given to me by Buddhist monks during my training in India. I've never been to India. By the 20-month mark I was making nearly $75,000 each month, and the lies had grown even more outlandish. I would bathe myself in light in my videos to make it look like I was glowing, use careful camera angles and more light tricks to make it look like I was hovering a few inches above the cushions I was sitting on. I had even had a place built out in the desert called Sri Daipa's Enlightenment Retreat that I moved to and would host seminars at. Things started to slow down at around 2 years though. Instead of averaging 30 to 35 new members per month, I was barely getting 2. I knew I needed to avoid stagnation. I needed something big to get people's attention again. I settled on something one of the members of my inner circle called a transmission of enlightenment. I was skeptical at first, but she actually could read Sanskrit and had some book of supposed Buddhist or Hindu magic. To be honest, I thought it would be too outlandish to be believed. Even though I peddled all this esoteric nonsense, I hadn't fallen for it myself and knew, or thought, that nothing would come of the ritual. I explained this, in a roundabout way to avoid exposing myself, to this member, and she agreed to be the first person I would transmit enlightenment to. A few days later everything had been set up at the retreat. It was in a small, private, room away from the main pavilion where I would host my regular seminars, and it was attended by only a dozen or so members of the inner circle, for a hefty price. I had one member operating a spotlight to shine on the volunteer when I touched her to really sell the illusion. Things went well at first. I gave some short speech of gratitude to everyone in attendance, how far they've come, how none of this would be possible without them, and how appreciative their friends and family would be if they were also convinced to sign up to be enlightened for only $99 a month. I was really trying to sell this ritual. I had swapped my normal white clothes for gold and red robes. There was incense burning on a small table between me and my volunteer. The lights were dimmed and a recording of some chanting was being played at a low volume. She stepped forward, and I butchered some Sanskrit incantation I had poorly memorized from her book. I raised my hands above my head and instructed everyone in the room to fill me with their energies as I reached out and made contact with my volunteer. The tip of my middle finger rested on her forehead for a fraction of a second before she fell to the floor, bathed in the spotlight that had been set up. There was a collective gasp as her body writhed and contorted before going stiff, her eyes rolling back into her head, her body slowly withering into a grayish husk of what it had been before. Thinking on my feet, I instructed a couple members to take her body away before quickly explaining that she must have had impure intentions, and I quickly shocked myself away to my room. It's been 4 days since the ritual. The skin on my right hand, the hand I touched her with, has turned a sickly gray color and become dry and cracked. It's spread up my arm and I can't move it anymore. Streaks of gray are reaching towards my chest. I've had constant nightmares of horrific creatures ripping at my flesh, tearing me apart. At the time of the ritual there were about 80 members at my retreat. My inner circle have tried keeping them at bay, but people have questions that I don't have answers to. I know I'm going to die soon, but I'm not sure what is going to kill me. The rot that's consuming my body, or the people I've conned who are banging at my door. Story 3. Why did the garbage men start coming in the dead of night? I've been losing an average of 30 minutes of sleep every night for the past 10 days. Now I'm down to a paltry 4 hours and 30 minutes, my walls are beginning to shift and my vision is blurring. I have to focus. I need to focus. Someone out there has to know. Does anyone know why the garbage collectors have switched to the night shift? Even asking it sends shivers down my spine. It's late and soon I will hear them turn up to collect. I can't sleep upstairs anymore, not where they can see me. Now I sleep in the living room with my gun propped up against my shoulder, the weight a stern reminder that I am present. I am awake. I am a threat to them. They won't try anything if I'm a threat to them, right? Fuck, I'm sorry. Let me explain. My name is Tyson. I'm a farmer with a thriving family, a loving wife and 2 bright young boys. We live in a very remote area that requires a significant amount of divergence for basic services. I won't say where, I won't risk my family or my business, especially knowing what kind of armchair detectives there are out there. I respect what you all do and fear you in equal measure. So I'd rather throw you a bone you can thoroughly chew on as opposed to delving into mine and my family's personal info. What I can tell you is this patch of land has been in my family for 6 generations, was not acquired illegally, built on sacred land, and to the best of my knowledge has never had a violent occurrence or bloodshed. We're normal, hardworking folks who have always tried to do right. Which makes what is going on here all the more difficult to understand, to quantify and reason with when the basic logic gives way. I hear you, you're undoubtedly scratching your heads and asking why are garbage collectors such an issue, and I don't blame you. I'll get to that. Something shifted by the gates. No sound, can't be the garbage men, you hear them a mile off. They're not subtle about making their presence known. The first night they turned up was so startling that I honest to God thought we were being robbed by the most unprofessional thieves this part of the world had ever birthed. Rambunctious, loud, and borderline jovial in their candor. It was always the same. Each and every time. The sounds of the huge mechanical vehicle roaring as it drove up my dirt road, crushing twigs and kicking up dirt as it ground to a stop by the gates some 50 feet from my front door. 2 thuds, boots hitting the ground, stumbling over to the main gate where our trash was left for the garbage men on a Tuesday. Usually a couple of surly men got out, grunted, and hauled ass out of the area as soon as possible. These 2? Couldn't have been happier to be there from the sounds of things. Young men, the smiles almost visible in their tone. This the one, Bill? Looks ready to me. I reckon it is, Jeff. Let's get her done. A laugh, a high five, the sounds of something being dragged and thrown into the truck before they'd back out of the driveway and go off into the night. Unusual, right? My wife and kids certainly thought so, especially when the trash was still there the next morning. Maybe they were some weird kids pulling a prank? My wife Lucy remarked, taking a sip from her coffee and glancing nervously at the window. I think she was saying it more for our boys' benefit than our own. I nodded and ushered them away from the windows, told them to go play. The next night, it happened again. No specific time so much as that dead of night period between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. when the world falls totally silent around you. None of our animals made a peep during that time frame, nor did we dare to. Because when we heard them roll up again, we were paralyzed with fear. It took a few minutes to realize it, but when I looked to my wife and she returned my fearful glance with a wide-eyed stare and a nod, we scooped up the boys and huddled in our bed. The exact same sounds. The exact same timed footsteps. The exact same conversation. We heard them drag something wet into the truck before leaving after maybe 15 minutes. My younger boy Jace was always anxious, and hearing this uncanny valley shit at his age sent him into a panic attack. We spent the remaining time soothing him while my older son Travis took to peering through the window with me. Our pig pen that lay some 40 feet to the right of the house had the door ripped off the hinges and a blood trail leading from the entrance all the way to the farm gates where the garbage men had been. When we mustered up the courage to inspect further, the pigs were silent, unmoving and staring at the long dirt road that led away from the home, the tall trees that littered our farm looming overhead as if to silence them from telling what they'd seen. We tried calling the city council to complain, but they were as perplexed as we were, said trash pickup day was still Tuesday and that since it was only Sunday, we weren't due. They advised we filed a complaint with the police for trespassers, but that yielded absolutely nothing. In the meantime, things escalated. Night 3 brought us the same routine, same sounds. Even after we'd taken to putting a lock on the pig pen, they still took one. This time making sure to leave a small pile of viscera behind. Perhaps as a warning, we elected to putting the animals in the barn and deadbolting it, hoping the pranksters would get the message and perhaps get bored. I'd ordered a CCTV camera, but with my location being so out of the way, it was going to take time to arrive and I wasn't about to stand in my window with a camera pointed out at some weirdos. We didn't consider the consequences of this defiance. It was night 5. The boys were sleeping in our room and like clockwork, they showed up and pulled me from what little sleep I was getting, my wife soon after. Silently, goosebumps raised on our skin and a chill in our bones, we strained our ears against the open window, hoping to hear their frustration and subsequent decision to leave. The routine continued until Jeff spoke to Bill. The moment they opened their mouths, I knew something was horribly wrong. "This the one, Bill? Looks locked to me." "I reckon it is, Jeff. Let's pay him a visit." They rattled our front door knob and politely knocked at the door. 5 rhythmic knocks, 5 seconds of silence, 5 more aggressive knocks. I bolted downstairs and grabbed my rifle, keeping the lights off but my aim focused on them. Adrenaline pushing fear aside, if only to defend my family. "I don't know who the fuck you are, but you've been coming onto my property unannounced and I ain't standing for it no more." I pulled back on the bolt and the sound filled the room. "You got 3 seconds to turn on your heel, or I'm firing." My eyes adjusted to the front door and in the darkness, 2 shapes stood behind my door, shrouded by the shadow of the night. They were tall, thin legs and bizarre movements, like they were swaying in place. Those 3 seconds felt like an eternity. 1. The shadow to the front leaned forward, trying to press its face against the glass. Something was wrong. 2. It moved away and tapped the letterbox, testing if it opened up. When it did, it held it open and spoke as the second shadow stepped closer. 3 never came. Instead, I backed away out of terror and barricaded our room, unable to speak. It repeated my last words back at me. Exact same pitch. Exact same tone. But something was off about it. Like hearing your own voice played back through old speakers, you sense an eeriness to it. As I'd instinctively taken steps back, however, the other one spoke. This was the first time either said anything that didn't repeat, and I swear to God it makes my heart pound in my throat just typing it. "We have come to collect. Come outside." My legs carried my body before I could register what was going on. Rushing to the bedroom and locking it, I pulled my family in close and held my head down to theirs, desperate to block out whatever ungodly sounds erupted from our front door. It took a half hour before they gave up, assumed their usual routine and left, the sound of the tires speeding off up the road bringing some degree of relief. Until the following morning when our nearest neighbors, the Gundersons, reported a break-in at their farm some 5 miles up the road. The perpetrators had smashed through the gate, entered the barn and done such violent acts to their cattle that of the 10 that had been attacked and mutilated, only 2 survived and were immediately put out of their misery by the patriarch, Ted. "You've been having problems with these sons of bitches too, Ty," he bellowed down the phone once I began retelling our sleepless events. "Shit, you sound like hell and probably look worse than the cows at this point. I ain't having it. You got a young family to support, and when they hurt one of us, they hurt all of us. Tonight we put an end to it, you hear?" I nodded, agreeing to stake out our property that night and do whatever needed to be done. Hands still shaking, I grabbed a stiff drink from the cabinet. Never been much of a drinker, most of this was my dad's for the tougher times. But if times weren't tough now, I don't know when the fuck they would be. Ted rolls up around 11 p.m., wife and kids are asleep, and we shoot the shit in the living room for a while, mainly discussing how the harvest had gone and what we could do to protect our livelihoods in this day and age. The conversation petered off as they often do when a night draws on, but it was as we fell silent that the realization swept over us. We were going to confront these people tonight. I gripped my gun a little tighter as Ted gave me an assuring nod, peeking out the window for any signs of the garbage men. "Son of a, my farm," he bellowed, springing to his feet and bursting out the door before I could get a word in edgeways. He was halfway down the road before I could ask him what the fuck he was doing. He turned, his eyes wild with fear and rage, pointing a shaking finger to the small shape that was his house far across the hill. It was on fire. Large pillars of smoke billowing forth as the fire danced in the light, illuminating the surrounding fields. "I can't sit here while my livelihood burns away, Ty. If those bastards are behind this, well, you can't bet your ass they won't last the night when I'm through with them. I'll teach them a fucking lesson about the value of things, the things people throw away." He turned on his heel and ran to his truck, speeding off before anything more could be said. This would be the only night the garbage men don't pay us a visit. I get a bit of extra sleep, but my wife doesn't. She just stares out the window at the Gunderson farm in the distance and shakes her head. She knows how there will be no help on the horizon. She knows how close we are to that fate. And seeing that scares me to death. The 8th night. They arrive with no vehicle sounds, no grand build-up to the crescendo of their routine. They whistle softly as if calling an animal, patient in their call as they scrape something around in the dirt. I'm crippled by fear and cannot dream facing them. I look around in the dark and see Lucy is still asleep, Travis is snoring in the corner, but Jace is wide awake and transfixed. And staring at the window overlooking our driveway, reaching out to open it. I leap out of bed and just about tackle him away, the shock of waking up to such a violent affair sending him into a panic attack as the entire family snaps awake in a frenzy, shouting over one another as he cries uncontrollably. "This has got to stop, Tyson. We can't do this anymore. We can't live like this." Lucy was exhausted, her eyes barely open and her teeth chattering. In the moment of silence between us, the whistling started again, almost mocking in its tone if it weren't for the sinister giggling behind it. "Shut up. Shut the fuck up and leave us alone," she screamed, walking towards that same window. It took everything I had to hold her back as she fell to pieces in my arms, the entire family crippled by nerves and a lack of sleep. It was only when one voice cut the air that the final night's events were set in motion. The things people throw away. "Oh, fuck. Ted." One look into my wife's eyes, and I knew what she was thinking. There was no stopping her. She darted around, packing the kids' clothes and any essentials she could find, ignoring the whistling outside and instructing our boys to focus on getting whatever they needed. "You do what you need to do. I don't care if the nearest town is a 3-hour drive or I undergo the 7-hour drive to my mom's. I will not stay another night in this fucking house. Not until they're gone." She was almost delirious, fueled by fear and anger as she darted around like a hurricane, turning over tables to get what she needed as if prepping for a weather event. Within the half hour she'd been rushing around, the noises had faded and the outside once again fell silent. I couldn't leave the house. It had been in our family's lineage for generations. We'd been born here, lived here, and died here no matter what. As the head of the family, it was my job to stay here and protect it. Even if I couldn't protect those that I loved most under its roof. She waited another hour before getting in the car and leaving, kissing me with all the passion she'd had when we first met. I told Jace he had to be strong and that he'd one day conquer his fears because I believed in him. I told Travis that as the eldest, he needed to protect them like his life depended on it. Then, just like that, I waved them goodbye and promised I'd join them at their mother-in-law's when this was over. Now all that was left was to sharpen my resolve and find out what this was. I took the chance to try and get some sleep during the day, but no matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't come to me. So, liquid courage it was. One way or another, this was going to end. Night 9. The penultimate night. Not a sound. I mean that in the most literal sense. The wind didn't move, the trees didn't speak, not a single blade of grass danced and no dirt was kicked up. Everything was silent. So silent. My own thoughts were amplified in this void of sound. Every inane thought of what could happen flitted through my mind and forced me to double-check every window and door. Triple-check the locks, ensure no oversight was left. Couldn't let them get an opportunity. Even if it's just me. I know they're watching even now. If I didn't know any better, I'd have set a shadow move just behind the porch window. Can't be sure, not without checking. I think they were biding their time, keeping me on edge and making sure I knew they could step in whenever they wanted and do as they pleased. But I kept my nerve. I resisted the urge to bolt to the truck. I've got my whiskey and I've got my gun. I'll see this through, even if it kills me. Night 10. Now we're all caught up. I checked on the animals this morning. What was left was a pile of bones, flesh and waste. They'd been taken the night before and I don't know how I didn't hear during the silence. There was but one horse's body left, teeth marks riddled the torso, and the legs had been torn off. Our crops had grown fetid, decayed and worn, nothing in our farm would yield a damn thing anymore. My livelihood was decimated in front of my eyes. Gone. It's late now, I'm sat in my armchair with the rifle loaded and ready. My hands are shaking and my knee won't stop bouncing. I feel the dread start in my gut and worm its way through my chest before lodging in my throat and forcing every breath to be a labor of pain. They came early tonight, truck roaring and routine sounds in full swing. Only there weren't 2 sets of thuds this time. There were 6. They walked up to the porch, a shadow covering every facet of the window and the door panes. Not a speck of light coming through. The voices don't change their pattern, they never do. This the one, Bill? Looks ready to me. They pound their fists against the window, a dull moan emanating from the background. Pained, muffled, and growing in strength. I reckon it is, Jeff. Let's get her done. Nails drag down the glass. A horrific groaning accompanying the repeated intonations of their godforsaken phrases. The things people throw away, Ted. Poor Ted smashing his head against the wall, repeating it with every 6 swing. It was only when I heard the 4th voice that I finally looked out the window, perhaps on instinct. Not until they're gone. My Lucy. My sweet Lucy calling to me. I can't begin to tell you what I saw when I pulled back the curtains for just a split second, but every forbidden aspect of it is burned into my brain and it will not leave me even as I shut my eyes from the surrounding chorus of madness. My kids, my fucking kids are now saying they've come to collect. That I must come outside. That whistle has come back, it's almost soothing. I can't bear to do this on my own. I can't live with that image in my fucking skull anymore. I miss my wife. I miss my kids. I miss sleeping soundly at night. What if it is them out there? What if they're really just wanting me to get help and my own sick mind has put me in such a state that I'm here, asking you for help on something that is, at its core, truly simple. I'm going to put down the laptop and open the door. I have to know. I have to. Why did the garbage men start coming in the dead of night?